Good evening and welcome again to another edition of Dapsy Chairs, where we bring you games from all over the globe. Today, I have a game that I want to share with us. This game was played by Kent Slate, who's on the white side, and Jacob Jones. It's actually a game that involved the very popular opening fried liver. I really didn't know people still play a lot of the fried liver. And going through this game, I saw that even super grandmasters play this line. So it's a very, very theoretical opening. But actually, by the way, this game went pretty deep into the opening. I mean, the theory until one of the players debuted. So this game was played at the most recent rapid tournament that was organized by Live Chess. Of course, Malcolm Wothen, a former student of the Howard University, is the CEO of the Live Chess and is one of the main. He's actually the main guy in charge of Live Chess, and Live Chess is one of the organizations we have in Washington D.C. that promotes chess. So they pretty much hold tournaments. Sometimes it could be blitz tournaments. Sometimes it could be rapid tournaments. Sometimes it could be charity. Anything that has to do with the promotion of chess in Washington D.C. So this is a game I actually was sent to. I was told to check out this game and see what I can do about it. And yeah, it's a kind of wild game. Of course, you should expect that if one of them, or I mean, if it's a game that involves a fried liver attack, it has to be a wild game. So let us get right into it. White started with the move e4. Of course, e4 is played. We have e5, knight f3 is played. We have knight to c6. We have bishop to c4, of course, trying to put the bishop on the most active square. And of course, when the bishop goes to c4, we call it the the Italian game. When it goes to b5, we call it the Roy Lopez or the Spanish game. Here, black continued with the move knight f6. Now, knight g5 was played by Ken Slade. Surprising because I was like, this line has been played so many times, and of course, there's a verdict out there on this line. Most of the time, I think black stands better because it actually has a lot to show for the pawn it gives up. Where is it giving up the pawn? Well, we're about to find out. Knight f6, I mean, knight g5. What's the point of knight g5? We have a double attack on the f7 pawn. So the d5 pawn has to be moved to cut the communication between these two pieces. d5 is played, it takes d5. Now you must play knight to a5. In this situation, you cannot take back on d5. If you take back on d5, then you're going to have to deal with a lever that is fried. So queen takes, king takes, queen check, and this doesn't look so good for the black pieces because now the king is permanently a weakness. You have so many pieces, you have to deal with so many weaknesses, and this normally doesn't go well for the black pieces. But in this situation, this wasn't all happen in this game. So after the capture on d5, knight goes to a5, which is the most logical move of this position. Knight a5 was played, bishop b5 check. This is all theory. c6 captures on c6. Pawn takes. Bishop goes to d3, keeping an eye on the e4 square because it's trying to use this knight. It's probably might want to bring this knight to e4. So that this knight actually has something to protect it on e4. So after the move bishop to d3, knight to d5 is played. Of course, the immediate threat is black is trying to win the knight on g5. Now, this is the question here. White is up a pawn. Black is down a pawn. So what does white have for this pawn? Well, a pawn, that's all he has. What about black? What does black have for this pawn? You could see that black's pieces are kind of free to move around freely. The bishops have open diagonals. The knights are already on very active squares. Even though we have a knight on the rim here, but it's not as dim as we think it is. So black pretty much has a very active position. Well, I won't say very active position, but he has an active position. He has something to show for being down a pawn. So the move knight f3 is played. Now, mind you, all this position has been played so many times. I mean, I can just list the players. I mean, in this position, we've seen Wesley So versus Carlsen, the same position. We've seen Aronian versus Dinglerin, the same position. We've seen Nakamura versus Fabiano, the same position. We've seen Aronian Nakamura. I mean, the super grammars get engaged in this position and they played. So, um, Bishop d6. All this is still theory. Bishop d6 is played. Of course, it's very important to not just protect the pawn, but to put the bishop to a very dangerous diagonal. So bishop d6 is played. White castles, black castles, rook to e1, threatening to take the pawn on e5. F5, that's a very sharp move. Now, like I said, all these things have been played before. Nothing new here. And this game actually went deep into the opening theory, where at some point in time, somebody actually made a move that wasn't really the normal move made in this position. So knight takes pawn. Now, white is up 2 pawns. Of course, he has his pieces here really waiting to get developed. And this is the idea of gambits pretty much. When you give up a pawn, you're giving up a pawn for an active position. You're giving up a pawn for a rapid development. So black says, you know, hey, you can take all the pawns, but just give me the development. So knight takes e5. Queen goes to f6, threatening to win a piece on e5. Knight goes back to f3. Of course, this knight is very important. Most importantly, defends the h2 square, which is a very weak square. So knight goes to f3, g5 comes. Now, this is what black is playing for. Black is going to throw everything at the white pieces. He's not trying to allow white to have a smooth, we remember the word smooth, yes, a smooth development, so white is going to waste time getting the bishop of the game, because the bishop is blocked by these 2 pawns. And of course, you don't have time trying to play knight c3 here. You can't play knight c3 because this knight is about to get kicked off. You don't really have a good square for the knight. So black is actually has something going on. So after the move g5, c4 is played. White says, you know what, I'm going to have to start my own counter attack. If you're trying to come get me, I'm going to try to look for what to do to come get you or push you back. c4 is played. We have knight goes to f4. Bishop comes back to f1. It's interesting that white has all his pieces on the back rank except the knight. He has all the pieces on the back rank except the knight. Like I said, this is a very popular position. This position has been played several times. Wesley So, Aronian, it's been played so many times. So after the move bishop to f1, black plays g4, attacking the knight on f3. He says, well, I'm going to just play d4. Takes the knight, takes back. So let's get back to reassessing this position. White has how many pawns? He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns. Black has 1, 2, 3 pawns. Sorry. Black has 1, 2, 3, 4 pawns. So white has 3 pawns for the piece. A good compensation, I would say. But you still have to try to get all the pieces in the game, because if you don't, you might just get into some trouble. So queen takes f3 is played. We have knight moves back to e6, moving away from the danger on f4. We have queen goes to c3. You're not just protecting the pawn on e5 on d4, but also you're attacking the knight that is on a5. So I said knight takes on d4. Now, you cannot take back here right now because knight c2 is going to be very, very strong. So what happens after knight takes d4? We have c4, so we have c5. Attacking the bishop, number one, and forcing the bishop back. Of course, we have possibilities of bringing the rook to put pressure on the knight, or even bring the bishop to try and get that knight. So after the move c5, like I said, all this has been played before. Most recently, I don't know if this is as recent as possible, but this game was played between Erigaisi and Gupta. Well, I would say it's that recent because this is 2022. That's about 3 years ago. But based on the opening tree that I have in front of me, this position has been reached before. So bishop goes to c7. So he has b4. All this has been played before. Now b4 is played. Now the idea is to force his knight to not so good square. And after knight here to the square b7, the pieces are not looking so good. So after the move b4, black plays bishop to e6. Now, that is the first move that actually not in the theory, what I say. Bishop e6 is, I would say, is a novelty. Is it a good novelty? Absolutely not. Because after the move bishop to e6, black is just worse. Yeah, black is just worse after the move bishop to e6. Because now you're giving back the pawn and you still really don't have a whole lot. Well, you still have some active pieces. I mean, the bishop is active, the queen is active, the knight is active. So what exactly is the idea about giving back the piece? I really don't know. But in this position, bishop e6 is played. But the most played move in this position is the move rook to b8. Makes a lot of sense. And then we have the move bishop to e5. So after the move bishop to e6, we have bishop to b2. Now it's just simply trying to capture the piece on d4. So he played bishop to e5. He says, you know, I can let you take that piece for now. He says, well, I really have to take it. And now all of a sudden, white is just winning. Well, white has a clear advantage based on the engine. So what exactly does white have? Even though now white can probably got his piece back, it still has very active pieces, but it's very important for white to get his last minor piece in the game. Knight on d2, I don't know. He has to get his knight in the game at some point in time. So after the rook takes, queen captures back, takes on b4. So what does white have? White has one, two, three, four, five pieces. Black has one, two, three, four, five pieces. So who has a better position here? Number one, the black king is very, very weak, looking very, very weak. There is no way to hide for this black king. No way to hide. The black king is not looking so good. The rooks are not really doing much anyways, although there are several files they can actually find themselves on that can be very active. Now, the bishop on e6 is not looking so good. But what if it once the bishop gets to the square, d5, it might be a different ball game. So rook goes to d8, protecting the knight on d4. We have knight to a3. Now, if the knight can get to c4 and then b6, that's going to be really strong. But what if the knight gets to c4 and the bishop takes? Bishop takes is be very, very strong. This is going to be looking very bad for the white pieces because then you have the one, two, three bishops looking to your position. Now, you don't have the only minor piece you have is a knight, which is really not going to do much. The major pieces you have really can't help you yet. So we don't know how this game is going to turn out. So knight a3 is played. Of course, it's very important to get your last minor piece in the game. So after knight a3 is played, king to f7. This is something I always talk about in my videos. If you have to move your king, either willingly or unwillingly, in any kind of position, it's a sign that there is trouble somewhere. I have no idea where this king is going to. King f7, what's the point? What's the point of king f7? Now, after the move king f7, white is just crushing based on the engine. White is just crushing. White has so many moves. There's knight to c2, uh, knight to c2 is the top move. There's knight to c2, there's rook to e1. It's actually easy for white to get all these pieces in the game. This bishop on b2 is going to cause a lot of mayhem for this king and the position pretty much. So after the move king f7, rook to e1 is played. We have queen to g7, threatening nothing. Well, knight f3 could be a check. Because after knight f3, if queen takes, I can take on b2. So I have to do something about that threat. King h1, thank you. Says, you know what, I'm not going to fall for that. So I'm going to move my king away so there is no knight. So if you try to do any knight here, you're going to get very rude shot, queen g7. So rook to g8, threatening nothing really. Because you still cannot play knight here because I'm just going to take, check, and after take, can I take this? Yes, I can. So knight to c4, improving the positioning of the pieces. Now you cannot take, like I said, because if you take, you're going to have to deal with this three bishops. I mean, the position is going to look very bad for the black pieces. And like I said, I don't know what the king is doing on f7. Yes, we know the king is a fighting piece, but on in situations like this, you don't want to put your king out there. So knight c4 is played. Rook to d5. What's the point of rook to d5? The immediate threat is just to capture the pawn on c5. Hey, why not just tip the pawn? But white says, no, I don't want you getting my pawn. I'm going to protect the pawn. I'm going to start throwing some pressure on your king on f7. So knight d6 check is played. We have king to e7. Queen takes d4. That's a beautiful tactical move. Now the idea is if the rook takes, have knight takes check, followed by knight takes that, attacking that. So if you take that, I'm going to take these and I'm just winning. Or if you decide to take with the queen, I'm still going to take, and then you cannot take this because our knight takes, followed by knight here, and I'm just winning. So that was a very beautiful, beautiful move played by white. Well, one thing we also have to say is, you don't just stumble over moves like that. When you have better placed pieces, when you have better placed pieces, good things always happen. So queen takes d4, very nice move by Kent. So queen takes d4, queen takes back, bishop captures. Now the king has to move because, like I said, you cannot take because of the king. Knight takes f5, you're just crushing. So bishop goes to c4. Now all the pieces are getting into the game. And the angel said that was actually not the best one. I probably would have moved my bishop to e3 right here, but instead it went bishop to c4. Now the idea is you cannot take on d4 because there is bishop takes check followed by bishop takes, and you're just pretty much crushed. So rook goes to b8. What's the point of rook to b8? Of course, you want to get the rooks in open file as much as possible. So bishop takes d5, bishop takes back, knight takes, and now, of course, all of a sudden, white is a whole piece up, and there is nothing black can show for the piece. Rook goes to f8, attacking the knight on f5. Knight comes to e3, attacking the bishop on d5. Of course, you don't want to take that because after knight takes d5, there's bishop takes f2, and you're just busted. So bishop takes a2, rook attacks the bishop, bishop goes to d5, up to e6. Rook threatens the check on b7. Still, this pawn is hanging. Well, we don't have any mate to worry about, so we can actually check, pick the pawn here, or pick the pawn there, whichever one. But I'm very uncomfortable with white position. I would have just invested invest some time in moving my pawn to h3 so that I don't get bank rank mated. So rook takes f2, knight goes to c4, threatening the bishop, threatening the check on e5. It plays rook to a2. We have rook check. We have knight check. Sorry, the king goes to d8. We have a bishop check. The king moves to e8. We have a rook check. The king moves. We pick a piece. He plays a move like, I don't know if you saw it or more. Might be down on time. Of course, bishop takes rook, and after this, black resign. Very, very wild game. And like I said, this position has been played several times before. And like I said, I never really know that people still engage in the fried liver, because normally in this position, most of the time, most of the game, you see this situation after this move, the most played move here is d3. I mean, a lot of super grandmasters play this. So after the move bishop to c5, there's c3, or you could just castle. But c3 falls and then castle, and then there's a long positional pull. But like I said, people still play the flight river. Of course, people have different styles. People would always do, things that suit their style. So that was an interesting game there played by Kent and Jacob. All right, there's another game that I think I might have to share with us that was played in the same tournament. I would see if I can get my hands on that game, and then I'll let you all know. Thank you again for always being here. Check out the game, see what you think. Take care. God bless. See you soon. And bye for now.